more or less forced to work to 70, when his better educated professional counterpart, as I've already pointed out, didn't start work till 25. So it might be fairer to base retirement ages on length of work life rather than chronological age. But it's absolutely inevitable that people will have to work longer. The pension systems have to be revised, radically overhauled. And we can do it. I don't see any huge crisis as long as fertility doesn't stay chronically low. So along with policies of raising the retirement age, I think countries with very low fertility are justified in trying to nudge up the birth rate. And the way to do that, surely, is to make childbearing and work, parenthood and work, more compatible. By more flexible labour markets, flexible work hours, greater encouragement of part-time work, to suck people in into work who want to also raise a family. And in support of that agenda, it's worth pointing out that the countries in Europe with the highest female labour force participation have the highest fertility. So that's the way ahead in terms of fertility. Okay, so much for the advanced industrialized countries. Quite severe adjustments to be made, but I think no crisis, as long as fertility nudges up closer to that 2-child mark. I'm going to discuss very briefly the middle group of countries, basically Asia and Latin America, where fertility has declined from 6 broadly down to 3 or thereabouts, giving rise to a sort of age structure that looks like a bit like Korea in 2000, although the Korean fertility decline was so severe that the typical age structure in Asia and Latin America is more bell-shaped, without the undercutting of the age structure here that you see in Korea. The priority here is to increase employment. If you can do that, huge economic strides can be made, because it is, I repeat, a very favorable age structure for rapid social and economic development, with this high ratio of workers to dependents. Now, it's easy to say raise employment for this burgeoning labour force, but not so easy to achieve. And I'm not an economist, and I won't go into ways in which employment prospects can be made more buoyant than they otherwise would. But it's worth pointing out that if, with a growing labour force, particularly of young men between 15 and 24, at the youth bulge, that if employment prospects are poor, there's some evidence that an age structure with lots of young men is prone to civil unrest and extremism. So the demographic bonus can turn sour if other conditions are not favourable. The other priority for Asia and Latin America, I think, is to reduce the very huge differences in childbearing between rich and poor. We know that families with lots of children are more likely to descend below the poverty line, and when they do that, they're less likely to rise up above the poverty line again. We know that children from large families are less likely to be well educated, less likely to be well clothed, less likely to be well fed. In other words, their human capital is impaired. Now, there are in most Asian countries and most Latin American countries very big income differentials in childbearing. A recent analysis showed that in a largest group of such countries, the poorest fifth of women had in their lifetime 2 unwanted births, compared with a mere half unwanted birth on average for the richest quintile. And that big fertility differential tends to entrench income inequalities for the reasons I've just described. So a second priority after employment would be to decrease the rich-poor differential in fertility and thereby make a contribution to reducing income inequality. Here we have the symbol of the remaining countries, mostly in Africa, with high population growth and high fertility. And in this chart is the key to understanding why high population growth and high fertility is such a disadvantage for economic and social development. I repeat, half the population in this sort of age structure is under the age of 15. Then you have to ask yourself, how is it that some countries escape from poverty? Good governance, fair trade, but the key to development is surely increases in human capital, the skills and educational level of the workforce, and increase in what you might call physical capital per worker. Machines instead of hoes, tractors instead of hoes, factories instead of little shops with blow torches on the roadside. That's the key for making people rich. And this age structure is unfavorable both to increasing human capital and for generating the savings to invest and increase physical capital per worker. And the reason for that is that a huge resources have to be devoted merely to educating, feeding, clothing, and housing the massive section of the population that is consuming more than it's producing, the under 15s. So neither households nor governments can afford to save as much as they would in a more benign age structure, and therefore modernization of agriculture and modernization of industry is stultified. And in terms of human capital, it's extremely difficult in a country where the school-age population is doubling every generation, not only to raise school enrollment, but to improve the quality of schooling. I mean, it really is a tough order for governments where 5 to 15 or 5 to 20-year-olds are going to double every 25 years, which is the case in Africa, and to ask them to not only improve enrollments of boys and girls, but to increase the quality of the schooling they get. So on both those two scores, development is dealt a serious blow by a population structure of this sort. Age structure is the key to understanding population and development links. It's not that Africa's overpopulated. It is that with that rate of growth, 2 to 3% per annum, implies this age structure, and for those reasons I've outlined, makes it more difficult to accumulate the human capital and the physical capital necessary to escape from poverty.